Biden shaking hands with ghosts and the Pope calls us racist. BLM was a grift and $36 million in PPP money went to government employees and teachers unions. FBI admits that the feds were at the Capitol on January 6th. Durham confirms Trump was spied on. CIA notes confirms that Trump was indeed targeted. Ed Buck was sentenced to 30 and a New York lieutenant governor was arrested on campaign finance fraud. The war for Twitter is on and Elon's in the lead. But now Biden's DOJ and SEC want Elon investigated. Brooklyn subway shooter story quietly disappears, and 25 million in lockdown in Shanghai. Maryland and California attempt to legalize infanticide. Joe plans to end Title 42. The national debt is 30 trillion and rising. I'm Mimi. This is the rundown. Now get ready for Politics Plus podcast.
Welcome to Politics Plus podcast, everybody, where we talk about politics and so much more.
Today we are covering the so-called Don't Say Gay bill that was recently signed by the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis.
So last time in episode 1, we promised you that we were going to be those friends that you could sit down and be like, hey, we broke down that bill. And guess what? That's what we're doing with episode 2. So let's get started. So this bill has been dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. Yet, that's not actually what it's called. All three of us have now read the bill. Does it say gay anywhere?
No.
It does not.
It doesn't. It doesn't say gay. But I actually took the time to look at what it does say. And what it does say is it says parents or parental 38 times. It says parental consent or parental permission 12 times. It says parental rights or some variation of that phrase 6 times. It says sexual orientation or gender identity 2 times. Both times those phrases are together. And it's basically the same sentence. And that's the sentence that everyone is losing their mind over.
Or is that people haven't actually read the bill?
Well, I think a lot of it is because people haven't read the bill, but I think a lot of it is that we are so used to taking hearsay as gospel.
Yes, because they say pretty much whatever mainstream media says, that is what they're taking for their word, as opposed to doing research like we like to do.
It goes right back to the old, you ever heard or seen the experiment in classrooms where they put everybody in a big circle and and someone starts a rumor and it goes around the room and everybody believes what, by the time you're all done, everybody believes it and has a different more warped version of it. So essentially with the media propagating this, you've got just a mass of people believing what one or two people that, big time talkers have said. And then it just like wildfire. And it does, the bill, like you said, Macy, the bill does not mention anything about gay at all.
Not once.
Not once.
Not once.
No. In fact,
No.
if I could actually say this real quick. If I could say this real quick. Page 4, Section 3 of HB 1557, which I think is the meat and potatoes of the bill, actually, the confrontational bill, is speaking to instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity. And it just simply says, such instruction or influence shall not be made or occur kindergarten through 3rd grade. So how you can get don't say gay out of that is beyond. Go ahead.
Or in a matter that isn't developmentally or age appropriate. That's the kicker. That's the thing. We're talking about age appropriateness of sex talks.
So you have to ask yourself the question, why? What is the big controversy? Whether you're LGBTQ XYZ, whatever what you call these people, or or straight or whatever. Why would you want to, what is the problem with keeping young children who are obviously way too young for this kind of conversation out of the conversation for now? Just for now. That's all they're asking, is for now.
And this is where I've heard where some teachers are now resigning because they can't talk about this. But again, the bill doesn't say anything about, anybody's sexuality.
Let's talk about really what the bill is. Okay, so the bill is not called the Don't Say Gay bill. It is, like Mark said, House Bill, so HB 1557. That is the name of this bill. And this is not uncommon legislation. There are multiple states that have this legislation, which we'll talk about later. But this particular legislation has caused a wildfire across our country. And I would like to just read the very first line of this bill that says, an act relating to parental rights in education. That is what the focus of the bill is. That is what the intention of the bill is. And I thought it was interesting. Everybody loses their mind about this bill, right? But the first 2 or 3 pages were already in law. It's the half of the 3rd page and everything down, the stuff that's been highlighted, that was additions to the law.
What I found remarkably interesting about the 7-page bill is it was so simple. When I read this, I was afraid to actually read it. I thought it's going to be full of mumbo jumbo I couldn't understand. But just here, one of my notes, the new bill opens up mandatory communication and full disclosure from school to parent and from parent to school. It can't get much simpler than that. It goes on. All lines of communication between school, student, and parents are a full disclosure, recommended for parents but mandatory for schools. Essentially, this puts parents in complete awareness and control. How can it be? Go ahead.
Yeah, it goes on to say that the procedures. It goes on to say that the procedures must reinforce the fundamental right of the parents to make decisions regarding the upbringing and control of their children by requiring the school district personnel to encourage the student to discuss issues relating to his or her well-being with his or her parent and facilitate this discussion with the parent. So that's saying that if there is something that they're not saying you can't say gay. If a kid comes to you and says, I think I might be gay, absolutely you should want to talk to that kid. But you don't give them a bunch of options. You go, you know what? I think this is a conversation that that you should really be having with your parent. Don't you think your parent would want to know this? And if they are a little hesitant about it, well, what if I was there with you? What if I facilitated this conversation with you and I sat down with you because clearly you feel comfortable with me?
Or how about the school social worker or guidance counselor? That is what they're there for as well. If this kid is having those type of issues, go to the proper resource, as opposed to letting the teacher, who in all actuality should not be saying or directing you in any manner.
I'm glad you said that, Mel, because I think, to your point, if a child does come forward and say that they think they're gay, a lot of times these liberal teachers are going to jump on top of this and actually promote that and propagate and further that thinking that they might be gay. And this bill, more or less, is telling them they can't, the teachers, they can't do that. This is the parents' job. Macy, you recommended that you go home and talk to your parents about this, but this bill,
which is fine.
Yes, but this bill is designed to keep teachers from talking to the kids about it, to help further that thought that they might be gay, or they might feel like they're a girl or a boy when they're the opposite sex. So this bill is more or less just to protect to protect the kids from persuasion that might not be of their parents' desire.
Or it doesn't even have to be that. Maybe this kid saw something and is curious. Again, if they don't feel comfortable with speaking to the parent, all the teacher has to do is direct them to either the social worker of the school or the guidance counselor. That is their job.
And I have to disagree with Mark, because I feel like the purpose of this bill is not necessarily to just all of a sudden stop this conversation from happening in the teachers and to protect the kids from, being groomed. I think there is a portion of that is true in the society, and that we have teachers pushing things that they shouldn't on kids. But I also think that this gives a parent steps to take and actual guidance on what the parents' responsibilities are. I think that, virtual learning gave parents this forced push to be invested in what their kids were learning and to actually be forced to see what their kids were learning. And that made a lot of people very aware. And when kids started going back into the school system, the teachers wanted to go back to, every day as is, the way that it had been, with no transparency whatsoever. But a lot of parents were not willing to relinquish those rights. And this is a fundamental statement. This is a statement saying you get to keep those rights. You're right. Those are your rights. There should be communication with the school, and the school needs to have one less thing on their plate. They shouldn't be responsible for teaching your kid about who your kid is. That's your job as a parent.
That's the parent's job. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I say this real quickly about the bill, and this pretty much will sum up what the bill is. We've already pretty much covered the 7 pages, but in the very end of seriously, we have it. So it's that simple. In conclusion, any school matter involving a minor child unresolved within 30 days shall be resolved by a qualified magistrate with at least 5 years of administrative law experience. Essentially, what that means is there's no incident or issue that will be allowed to continue or to fester for more than 30 days before it needs to be rectified, which I think is awesome, because it forces everybody to get it out on the table and get it squared away. Do you agree with that, Macy?
I do agree. I do agree with that. I think that there is a lot in this bill that it focuses on giving transparency. And so for me, I just took it as if you're going to teach something, it needs to be age appropriate for the kid. And I really want to get your opinion on this, Mel. So how do I word this? What is the purpose of a movie rating?
So you could know if you're able to watch it.
Or your kids
if
are.
your child is, if your kid is able to watch it.
Okay, so why do we not rate SpongeBob SquarePants for mature audiences only? Why is it not rated R or MA?
Honestly, it should be, with all the subliminal jokes that they have. But
okay.
Because it's appealing to kids, it's cartoonish.
It's age appropriate, right?
And pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
We have labeled it
Yeah.
based on the age appropriateness of each movie. So you can have a movie or a TV show or anything like that. And I am from the generation that literally grew up with parents fighting for the parental advisory stickers on music. You know, that was my generation.
So,
I was watching all these crazy parents do it.
I remember that too. Out of nowhere, I was a kid. There was no TVG, no TVPG. And all of a sudden on TV, there was that little thing before the show started. And that's where my mom goes like, not for you. I'm like, but we used to watch it. Not for you.
But we have come up with a system to tell us whether TV is appropriate for a certain age demographic, if it's not appropriate for a certain age demographic. We've done this with music. We've done it with movies. We've done it with TV. We've done it with games. You know, we've got games that are rated.
Even books.
Specific books that are rated for certain age levels and reading levels. So why is it so incredibly divisive to say that education should be labeled the same way?
I can answer that.
Oh,
please
go
do.
right ahead, Mark.
It's because they think that parents, teachers. Sorry, but they think that because teachers our teachers, surely they can handle teaching our children. You know, that's why they're there, right? Teachers are teaching kids. So that's why you don't see it the way you would on TVs and books and movies and so on, because we just naturally think, hey, they're teachers. Surely they're good for our children. But the problem is we have so many liberal teachers in our country that believe in things that we don't believe in necessarily, like conservative values and conservative things, that they're being taught our own children. I mean, my kids come home and tell me things that really kind of actually embarrass me, you know, my 11-year-old and 9-year-old. So it's very clear that the schools are saturated with liberal teachers that are dying to get their claws into our young kids, which is exactly why this law came about in Florida. I'm sure they saw the problem.
I'm assuming so, because and I'm just thinking about my experience when I was young. I didn't really know if my teachers were even married. I didn't even know if they had kids. Like, we didn't know anything about the teacher. Like, to me, if I even heard that my teacher was married, I would think to myself, can a teacher be married? That was my initial reaction as a kid.
Yeah.
And
your adolescent brain.
Exactly. Nowadays, these teachers are divulging way too much to a preschooler.
Thank you, Mel.
My preschooler does not need to know how your home life is.
Nope.
My 11-year-old asked a question tonight while he was in the shower about his penis. And I was like, okay, yeah, absolutely. We need to answer this. We need to answer this question for him.
Hi.
Because that's a parent's role. And yeah, so I called my husband and I'm like, hey, you know, I kind of explained a little bit, but I think that you need to explain it. I'm going to take my 6-year-old upstairs to do something else so that you can explain this to him, because whereas it is appropriate for my 11-year-old to understand what is going on with his body, it is not appropriate for my 6-year-old who does not have any of these issues, even though they're the same gender, even though they deal with the same stuff, even though they're probably going to talk about it tomorrow. That's still my responsibility to try and separate them for that conversation. And all this bill is trying to do is saying, if you want to have this conversation, talk to your parents. Ask every parent in the class, hey, do you feel okay with having this conversation? And there were several times in elementary school where my parents would sign, no, I'm not comfortable with something. And I would have to go sit in a different class while something was taught. And I don't understand why that's not an option anymore, because that's what this bill is asking for. It's asking, just talk to the parent first.
You know, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because, you know, and I thank God, where I send my kids, till this day, they'll still sign home that permission slip for my daughter who's 12. You know, we're going to watch such and such movie. Do you want her to watch it? And I'm just like, wow, because I hear other parents who the kids they'll just go in and, oh, we watched the movie today. And the parents like, really? What movie? Who gave you permission? Who was there? So I think this is where we're starting to lose those teachers with those good values. They're starting to go away. And I'm starting to notice that even within the same school district, not every teacher thinks the same way. And again, I am very thankful and blessed that the teachers that my kids have still go by that permission. Like, did your parents give you the permission to allow you to watch this movie? It could be the most stupidest movie, but at least they're asking permission, which I think that's what they should be doing. That's what they used to do before. And I don't know why. Well, this is precisely why this bill has come into play. It's because things have gotten way out of control. You know, the reason I can also say this. Watching TV with your kids, say you're on Netflix and you're scanning through what you think would be an appropriate show for your children to watch, and it'll even say appropriate for 11 years old or whatever it is, 13 years old, and then you'll get halfway through the show,
and find out that one of the characters in the family is a lesbian. She's 17 years old, a minor herself, and she's got her girlfriend there. They even kiss them, all kinds of different things that are happening on the screen in an age-appropriate show. So if you want to take that thought and then bring it to the schools and see what's going on with indoctrinating our young kids. This is why this bill has come into play, and praise God for that.
Is this legislation needed then?
I think there's a lot of things that actually led up to this being necessary. And I think, like I said earlier, I think it started with the visibility that was given during virtual school. And I think that the TikTok trends of teachers and everything like that, of LGBTQ teachers, really started at the tail end of 2021. In August and September, it started being a trending thing, of one of the most popular things. And it wasn't just one or two teachers. It was large groups of different people coming together and saying, this is what I'm teaching in my class. I've got my kids pledging allegiance to gay pride flags or queer alliance flags or whatever like that. And I think that a big part of that was seeing people post things that made legislators really feel like this had to be done.
The bill addresses normalization and indoctrination of children by personal and political views by teachers, which shouldn't be brought into schools by the teachers.
Okay, Mark, what do you think about the TikTok trend?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't look at TikTok, so I'm not out on TikTok, but I have seen some of the things that you're talking about. So if that's actually factoring into why this legislation came about, it's understandable. As well as just, people have an idea what's going on inside their schools. When their children come home and say things that like I said before, make you, and I mean, if you can make me blush. My son came home today and said something to me. I'm like, what? And I was embarrassed. Okay, so if it all comes down to media in general and how they're indoctrinating our children, it's a giant wave. And when it comes down to our children in schools being taught by the actual teachers, we got to say something. We got to do something. It's one thing to see a TikTok video. It's another thing to have your child indoctrinated by a teacher at school all day long. So that's essentially, we all know how Ron DeSantis thinks. He's very upfront. He knows
very family oriented.
That's right.
Upfront.
He knows what's going on. He puts it in plain black and white. We've already discussed this bill and how simple it is. I mean, if I can understand it, anybody can understand it, okay? It's very simple, cut and dry. Let's protect our kids, our youngest of our kids, who are the most impressionable, okay? Someone had told me, in fact, I think it was something that Danny sent to me on my DM. It may have been you, Macy, where, was it Phil Peterson? Is that right? Is that his name? Who was talking about how our kids are really only kids until they're around 6 years old. Was it you, Danny, that sent me that?
Jordan Peterson.
I shouldn't be saying that because
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson.
Yes, Jordan.
Jordan. Okay, let me stop right here because I mentioned Danny and no one even knows that Danny's on the show. Let me just say this. Our producer sent us something on a DM, or sent me something on a DM with Jordan Peterson, where he talked about kids, how they are really only children until they're around 6 years old. And it really hit me because my children are now 9 and 11. Okay, so and the reason I can say that is because I can see the adulthood, the adultness sliding in, coming into their lives, even though they're 9 and 11 years old. They're not 5 and 6 years old anymore. They're not innocent like that anymore. So what this bill more or less has done is help to protect our youngest and keep our kids young. Keep our kids young while they're still young. Because literally, I mean, seriously, until I heard this from Jordan Peterson, it didn't click. Our children are getting old, are becoming adults from like 6 or 7 years old on up. They're losing their essence of being a
Their
child.
innocence. Their
That's right.
innocence.
That's
yeah.
right. And I see it in my children.
Switching a little bit, I think that we all had to do the virtual school thing for a period of time, correct?
It was horrible.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
horrible.
So for y'all, it was absolutely awful. For me, it pushed me into homeschooling my kids. Okay. So when people talk about
over here, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't horrible over here.
Okay. See, right. Okay. So, but I think
let me clarify horrible.
when virtual school
Can I
happened.
clarify horrible real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Well, what I was going to say about, I wanted to clarify horrible. I didn't mean to say it was horrible necessarily, but it was not. They were not getting educated. They were not being educated at school, on the virtual school, which is why, Macy, God bless you for doing what you're doing at home with your kids, because my kids were not educated during that time. Shame on me.
Well, I think a lot of people pose the argument, well, you're fighting only for your kid. You're fighting for what you want for your kid. You're fighting for what you want taught, for what your beliefs are. My thing is, I don't even have a horse in this race. My kids don't go to public school. I don't have to worry about public school curriculum. I homeschool my own kids. The reason that I'm having these conversations and the reason that it's so important for even somebody who homeschools to read a bill like this is because as a parent, it is empowering and you want to fight for those other kids. Even if your kid's not in public school, you want to fight for those kids to have that freedom, to have that security, at least in those, like you were talking about from Jordan Peterson, those fundamental years that you never get back. That's why we're labeling things in alternative medias. That's why this particular podcast, just to go onto YouTube, has to click that it's not age appropriate for children. It's not appropriate for anyone under the age of 18. Okay. Even for this video, you're not allowed to have this conversation with somebody under the age of 18. So why would we allow the public school system to teach somebody that is not prepared for it? But what I was going to say was I think that a lot of this got brought up because everybody was focusing on the critical race theory being taught in school. It was sort of, and now the gender and race combination has made this so incredibly necessary because people started really diving in and looking at this critical race theory. And what is this critical race theory? And it got a lot of parents invested in looking at all of the different aspects, and they came across sexual aspects, right?
But also indoctrination as well, because as you mentioned earlier about TikTok, I also remember watching some of the teachers talking about how they don't want to use the American flag anymore. So they had a BLM flag in their classrooms, along with a LGBTQ flag. So, yeah, this is where, this bill addresses indoctrination as well in our kids, and where as parents we should stand on it and where teachers shouldn't.
And I think that the pronoun discussion that everyone is having on social media, put your pronouns in your bio, if you're literally trying to change the English language, why would we not think that you're trying to change it for the people that you're still teaching the English language to? The people that are currently learning it. Yeah. Like, Mark, do you want your kids to come home and be like, oh, well, the language is involved. I'm a they. Well, no, you're one person. You're definitely not a they. So where do you draw that line as a parent?
Well, it all just comes down to having good communication with your kids from the very start. If you're jumping into this conversation now, you're doing your kids a disservice all along. So I talk to my kid. I've said it before about things that they probably shouldn't have to hear, but they hear them anyway because I know if I don't say it to them and if I don't drive it home on a regular basis, they're gonna be influenced by someone else. Okay, and if it's not their school teacher, it's their phone. Okay, their smartphone
or their friends.
Well, exactly, or their friends. The whole thing with protecting your children from pornography. You can tell your kids, don't be looking at something like this on your phone, but then their buddy on the school bus who thinks it's cool to show them, and they see it that way. So you've got, I don't know where we went down this rabbit hole really, but I think it's a good one. But because you can't say it enough, you've got to drive this thing home with your kids. As radical as you may sound as a parent, you've got to be educating your kids this way. It's time to talk turkey, as our producer always reminds me.
And see, where do you fall on that, Mel? Because I think that even for somebody who wants their young child to understand, you have two daddies or you have two mommies, or if you want to explain those things personally to your kids so that your kid understands you better, I have no problem with that. That is completely your parental right. But that doesn't mean that all 25 kids in the class have to learn what your mommy and daddy or your mommy and mommy or whatever, what they're doing. That's where that line is, I think. What do you think, Mel?
So with what you're saying is, if my daughter were to bring up those questions, I would absolutely speak to her, openly, and tell her that there are some families that are not like yours. They don't have mommy and daddy. Because in all honesty, we all don't have, not everybody has the same family. And, if she brings up the question, I'll give her the answer, So again, this is where your kid and at what level you can speak to them. Like you said, not all 25 students need to know about that because we don't know where their head is at. To me is, if my kid brings it up, then I'll have that conversation with her.
Okay, the question right now is, what has the bill sparked? Okay, and the first thing that comes to my mind is Disney. Disney has gone off the rails, and I'd love to know how you guys feel about this, but it goes right back to, people not understanding the bill, not reading the bill before everybody heard "don't say gay," and that's what they ran with, including the CEO of Disney. Okay, Disney said in a statement, it's their goal as a company for this law to be repealed by the legislature or struck down in the courts. And the company is committed to supporting organizations that are working to achieve that. So when you have the CEO, what's his name, Bob Chapek, saying this, and actually, talking to DeSantis about this, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, about this bill, and tried to actually amend it and then represent it to Ron DeSantis to have it, to change it in their favor to make all their employees happy.
They don't have very many employees, do they, Mark?
200. Thank you for bringing that up, Macy. 223,000 employees. Okay, so
wow.
We can go into all the walkouts they went through, with people who are believing the "don't say gay" thing. I mean, we had people going out on their lunch break to try and influence the company to have them change things, which they couldn't do. In fact, DeSantis went on he slammed Disney as being too woke for its last-minute opposition of HB 1557 and criticized it in other companies that are against the legislation by saying, and before signing the bill into what's that called? When you sign the bill into
law.
I hit. Thank you. DeSantis has slammed Disney as being too woke for its last-minute opposition to the HB 1557 and criticized it and other companies that are against the legislation, saying before signing the bill, he doesn't care what big corporations say, I'm not backing down. Okay?
Mel, do you think that the size of the company has an impact on how much, I guess, influence it has?
Influence?
You, yeah. So do you think that the size of the Disney company and the reach of the Disney company has a substantial influence on whether or not they'll get this bill repealed?
No.
Can I say
No?
one thing before you elaborate, Mel? Florida,
Sure.
Walt Disney World Resort is the country's largest single-site employer. Okay? It's the biggest company in America, in other words, single-site employer. So imagine how they have to listen to their people and try and make everybody happy.
So I guess then people would be influenced by that.
I think that it's interesting that a company of this size with this reach that is, an iconic staple in our country. There are, if you go to a yard sale and you find a Mickey Mouse glass, you can sell it in Japan for like 8 times what it's actually worth, because Mickey Mouse and Disney is iconic. And whereas we look at it as this huge company that makes all these movies for kids and stuff, now they're talking about transforming their content to be 50% LGBTQ focused. Inclusive. Yeah. And it's not just LGBT, but it's minority focused. And I don't have huge problems with that. But I have an issue if you're focusing 50% of all content.
Absolutely.
Which they already had in their back pockets. That's what, bothered me, because they already had that. So this, like the new word right now that they don't want to hear is the word groomers. And that's pretty much what Disney is doing right now. So are these teachers, they're trying to groom our kids, groom them to something that they want them to be, as opposed to what we as the parents want our kids to be. This is where, as parents, we have to say, you know what? Cut the Disney Plus. We're not buying you any more of those products. As parents, you have to also take the stand so you can, and explain it to your kid. I had to explain it to my kids, like, we're cutting our Disney Plus because the way things are going, it's not right. And that's not the way we want you to, to grow up. Up and until they're of age, which is the age of 18, they can make their own decisions. Right now that they're kids, no, that's for mom and dad.
Well, one of the things that I know we all kind of dove into was what this had sparked legislatively. And that was a very interesting find to me. Looking at it, I actually found out that my state was the first state to put this into effect. So Tennessee actually in January put a bill very similar to this one up for all K through 12. Okay. Nobody was talking about that. Kansas in February did the same thing, except they actually made it a Class B misdemeanor to teach anything about homosexuality in materials in the classroom. Okay. So they physically made it a crime to teach about homosexuality materials. Okay. So you can't physically, you can talk about it, I guess, amongst yourselves, but you can't teach material on it to a class size. Then you had Indiana, who this one is intense, y'all. Yeah. So do you have what the Indiana one's about?
Hopefully it's the same thing, that they were requiring students under the age of 18 to obtain written consent from their parents before participating in any of the activities in the schools.
The actual
about
the
bringing
actual
permission
part,
slips.
It is about permission slips, but it would prohibit discussing human sexuality, which would include abortion, birth control, sexual orientation, transgenderism, if They were under 18 and you did not have parental consent. So you physically could not talk about everything, not just transgenderism. You can't talk about birth control. You can't talk about abortion. You can't talk about any of that thing until you have the parental consent.
And this is 18 and under, huh? Up to 18 years old?
Yeah, under the age of 18.
Isn't it interesting that DeSantis is catching so much hell just for up to kindergarten? Right?
Yeah, up to third grade.
Okay, kindergarten to third grade. Sorry. So now you have other schools that are up to 18, up to the full run of school, and I think that's a good idea myself. Again, it comes back to the parents. Parents should be teaching these kids about these kind of things. Leave it to the teachers to teach about arithmetic and history and all that.
According to NBC News, Georgia actually introduced a very, very, very similar bill to the Florida bill. And they introduced it on the exact same day as the Florida bill. But nobody's talking about the Georgia bill. They're talking about the Florida bill, which makes it seem a lot more like it's an attack on Ron DeSantis, not necessarily his legislation.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, is it's a personal attack on him. Anything that he says right now, it's blasphemy.
That's because he's the closest thing to Trump that there is out there. So they're going to come down on him harder. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I totally agree.
So while we were breaking very briefly just a minute ago, I happened to dive down a rabbit hole because, well, y'all have met me. I do that quite regularly. And I found myself at whitehouse.gov. What a useless rabbit hole, right? So on March 31st of this year, the Biden administration put out a memo. And it says, today the administration once again condemns the proliferation of dangerous anti-transgender legislative attacks that have been introduced and passed in state legislatures around the country. Who do you think he's talking about? He's talking about southern states. This is mostly southern states that we're talking about here. We've got this group, but it goes on to actually say, this kills me. The evidence is clear that these types of bills stigmatize and worsen the well-being and mental health of transgender kids, and they put loving and supportive families across the country at risk of discrimination and harassment. These bills, the president said, these bills are government overreach at its worst, and they are un-American and they must stop. Are they un-American?
What are they called? What are they called? Educating our children in areas that we don't want them to be educated in. Is that not overreach? I mean,
not to them.
Well, why can't my kid get a tattoo? Why can my kid not go get a tattoo without my consent? Why can't he do that?
He's not old enough.
Because there's laws that say that
he's not old
can't.
enough, right?
That's right.
Yeah, he's not old enough.
So, but Biden literally goes on to say in this, there is an actual subheading or a subheadline here that says reinforcing federal protections for transgender kids. The Justice Department announced today that all state attorneys general is reminding that the federal constitution and statutory provisions that protect transgender youth against discrimination, including when those youths seek gender affirming care. Which means that we are agreeing to allow children to change their bodies before their bodies have fully finished changing for themselves. But my kid is not allowed to smoke a cigarette because it would alter his lungs. He's not allowed to get a tattoo because it would alter his skin. He is not allowed to watch a rated R movie in a movie theater or drink. But somehow it is acceptable to take the right away from the parents and tell 15-year-olds and under that they are allowed to change their bodies without parental consent if it affirms how they feel inside.
Which, in all honesty, kids change their minds every 2 seconds. So how does that work? I don't know. It boggles my mind as to how the government thinks that our kids are capable to say that they're, you know what, I was born a girl, or so they told me. Now I want to be a boy. So we should all go with that? Really?
I was a
still trying to
huge tomboy growing up.
It doesn't show now, Macy.
Like, I was a huge tomboy growing up. I only hung out with boys for the most part. You know, I was always doing something outdoors and being weird, you know, and I haven't changed that much as an adult. I'm still that weird, awkward person who typically hangs out with more guys than girls. But that doesn't mean, like, you have to let kids be kids, and whatever they are, you gotta stop trying to label it. Kids are freaking weird, okay? They just are. All kids are weird. They have their own idiosyncrasies. But we have to just allow them to be instead of pushing them. Oh, you're in mommy's heels. You are actually a girl. Well, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got a great equilibrium if you can walk in mommy's heels, you know, there's that. Good balance, you know, but stop pushing this. Ugh.
Yeah.
I really just made that face.
Honestly.
You said, ugh, but it's actually very sickening.
I just wanted to say that I don't understand why people are bugging out when this particular law, or, you know, the Don't Say Gay, doesn't start, and it's not going to be affected until July 1st of 2022.
That's right. So in other words, until the next school year.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, I noticed that myself.
It's mind-boggling as to how these teachers are overreacting. It's not even a bill yet.
Being angry is trendy now. If you've got to find something to be mad about, whether it's a comment on Twitter, whether it's a post that you saw, whether it's, nobody can just be upset about something and find the actual channels of how to address what they're mad at. They just think that if I hashtag it right, all of a sudden it's going to change something. But I think that this comes back to having conversations like this, where we have not all agreed on everything, we have not all disagreed on everything, but we've been willing to come to the table and go, listen, we all read the exact same 7 pages. We took away different things from the 7 pages. We're all different types of people, but it comes back to the idea that because we are different types of people, our parental rights remain with us because we want to raise our kids to be the type of people that we are, essentially, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or just to raise good humans, period. This has been episode 2 of the Politics Plus podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you then. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
See you in 2 weeks.